Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cooke, and we have a very busy show for you this week. We'll catch up with several recent items from the Port Hawkesbury Town Council table, and we'll hear from Jim Mustard. He's the coordinator of the early childhood program known as Raising the Villages, and we'll see what Mustard and his colleagues have in store for Raising the Villages around Cape Breton Island, including right here in the Strait area. And we'll play Telile 24/7's infamous Fast Five game with Natalie Stevens, the support coordinator for the Strait Area chapter of Autism Nova Scotia. But we begin with an update on the recent renovations and realignment of lanes along Port Hawkesbury's most well-driven thoroughfare, Reeves Street. There's going to be a survey conducted in the coming days and weeks that will take the pulse of local residents, business owners, and others impacted by the 3-year-old Destination Reeves Street project. But we're also going to hear how Town Council would like to see another traffic count completed on Reeves Street before the town files its final report to the province on the project later in the fall. Here's a little background to help fill you in. Launched in 2019 as a provincial pilot project, Destination Reeves Street realigned 4 lanes of traffic into 3, with several two-way turning lanes near the entrances and exits to prominent businesses along a 1-kilometer stretch of the provincially owned Reeves Street. In March, town councillors were asked to vote on a pitch from Nova Scotia's Department of Public Works to cost-share a survey that would gather opinions of town residents and commercial business owners about the effectiveness of Destination Reeves Street. However, Port Hawkesbury councillors Mark McIver and Hughie McDougall were skeptical about the accuracy of a survey taken in the coming weeks. Both insisted that such a survey take place after the upcoming summer, which often sees the heaviest traffic along Reeves Street due to warm weather tourism. McDougall declared that traffic counts over the past 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic were inaccurate because of the reduction of travel across Nova Scotia, and he claimed that a survey shouldn't be conducted under this framework. However, Port Hawkesbury CAO Terry Doyle and Deputy Mayor Jason Aucoin both insisted that the 2021 summer traffic was consistent with pre-pandemic use of Reeves Street. Aucoin went a step further and predicted that the removal of COVID-19 restrictions in Nova Scotia will result in double the traffic on Port Hawkesbury's main street this summer, further muddying the final picture to be presented to the province as to the success of Destination Reeves Street. In the end, town councillors voted 3-1 to support the survey. McDougall registered the only nay vote, but they also voted unanimously on an amendment to that motion, which called on the Provincial Public Works Department to carry out one more traffic count this summer and make a presentation to Town Council in September before Port Hawkesbury files its final report on the pilot project this fall. At last week's regular monthly meeting of Town Council, some updates occurred on this particular situation. According to CAO Terry Doyle, the survey, being cost-shared by the province and the town, is expected to kick in later this month and continue through the spring. In addition to the survey, Nova Scotia's Public Works Department has also accepted Council's request to conduct one final traffic study this coming summer to provide the town with up-to-date figures before the town submits its final report on Destination Reeves Street to the province this fall. Here's the Mayor of Port Hawkesbury, Brenda Chisholm-Beaton, expressing her hopes for what the upcoming survey will accomplish.
So the survey really is going to be looking at the entire experience of Destination Reeves Street. So we'll be garnering input from citizens, from anywheres, from the facade program and the look and feel of Reeves Street now that it's been revitalized. We're going to be asking for feedback. What do you think of the new active transportation infrastructure and obviously the AT trail that now connects NSCC to the Uptown Core? It's certainly well used, but it's a great opportunity to really take the pulse of the community. And, is this something that they view as a success? Certainly another element of that will be the road reconfiguration along Reeves Street. As that improved, the ease of use for citizens. And the survey, of course, at the end of the day, it's going to be balanced with the data with regard to just the road realignment piece. Because at the end of the day, it was about making Reeves Street a street for everybody in all the ways they move, not just people that are driving, behind a wheel on Reeves Street. It's about the walkers, the bikers, all of the ways that people move, people who have mobility challenges, that require a AT trail to be able to get from point A to point B. It's about the safety at the intersections, and really it's the entire product that is Destination Reeves Street. So this is an opportunity for people to give their feedback so that we can understand as a town how this project has fared out overall. And the survey will, again, be included in addition to the data around the safety outcomes, so like your traffic, incidences of accidents before and after, incidents of speeding before and after. So do we have a safer street at the end of the day? So again, the survey balanced with the data is definitely going to be all taken part and parcel of the overall success of the Destination Reeves Street as well as the road reconfiguration pilot.
After the meeting, I asked Mayor Chisholm Beaton whether she felt that the summer traffic counts could be impacted by the recent lifting of COVID-19 restrictions across Nova Scotia. Here's her response.
That's correct. So that's what led to the amendment in that particular motion. Council certainly wants to make sure that this tourism shoulder, which will be reflected in the data from this upcoming summer, will be given kind of overall consideration. Certainly, the tourism numbers have been up for some businesses and down for others. But at the end of the day, we are expecting a busy tourism rebound. So those numbers will definitely give us a really good picture of what our traffic expectations will be post-pandemic.
Now, some of the folks that use Reeves Street and other streets around Port Hawkesbury the most often are the town's two taxi operators. And they recently got some assistance from Port Hawkesbury Town Council in being permitted to raise their taxi fares from $6.50 to $7 to help deal with rising fuel prices. Well, the town also took some additional steps at its most recent public meeting this past week, amending Port Hawkesbury's taxi bylaw to be able to give cab companies a little bit of leeway to make changes like fare increases during extenuating circumstances. Here's Port Hawkesbury Mayor Brenda Chisholm Beaton to explain it all.
There's a kind of a huge gamut of different external forces oftentimes that creates a lot of changes and influxes for businesses, COVID-19 being one of them. Certainly, conflict going on other parts of the world being another example. And it is creating certainly spikes at the pumps. Being able to amend or alter our taxi bylaw to be able to create a little bit of wiggle room around a much more immediate way to amend what the cost of that service will be to the citizens is just it's really setting our taxi companies up for a little bit more success, because like there is a business model that not just taxi companies will follow, but like other businesses, where you have a certain amount that pays for your overhead, your administration, your insurances, all of that, with a very small window for profit. So all of a sudden, if the costs increase for gas, then your profit is either disappearing altogether or becoming, really untenable in terms of being able to have a sustainable business. So making sure that we have a bylaw that is flexible, and we do anticipate that there could be ongoing spikes in prices at the pumps. This will allow a policy that's much more nimble, that will help enable the success of our taxi companies here in town. So it definitely is a process that expedites some of those changes that are needed.
We'll take a break from Port Hawkesbury Town Council issues for just a moment to concentrate on the presence of COVID-19 in our province. The provincial weekly data update given for COVID-19 last Thursday indicated that 6,991 cases had been detected from lab results over the previous 7 days, averaging out to 1,000 new cases a day. However, the Chief Medical Officer for Nova Scotia, Dr. Robert Strang, has insisted that no further restrictions are needed in the wake of the lifting of all restrictions and the ending of Nova Scotia's state of emergency on March 21st. Dr. Strang and his Deputy Chief Medical Officer for Nova Scotia, Dr. Shelley Dekes, made themselves available to media across the province this past Thursday, shortly after the COVID-19 data report became available. I was able to ask a question of Dr. Strang on behalf of Telile Community Television. You'll hear that in a few minutes after Dr. Strang and Dr. Dekes give their update on the state of the COVID-19 approach in Nova Scotia at this time.
I believe I've always been honest with Nova Scotians, and I will continue to do so. There's no doubt the current situation is concerning, and as you're going to hear from Dr. Dekes, positive tests are up significantly. Cases in long-term care are up, and hospitalizations are up to some extent. COVID is challenging us once again, and the public health team and I remain very much engaged in the pandemic response. That engagement may not be as visible as it has been in the past, but the work of public health prior to COVID rarely has been. Today, we'll update you on some of that work, less visible. But first, earlier this afternoon, a press release with updates on several important items was sent out. And those items included a second booster dose of vaccine for those 70 years of age and older, as recommended by the National Advisory Committee on Immunizations, will be implemented very soon in Nova Scotia, and more details will be released next week. The availability of Novavax's COVID-19 vaccine will become people will be able to start booking for that if that's their choice, starting tomorrow. And we're increasing the availability of free rapid test kits at more locations, including MLA offices across the province. But before I take you through some details of our transition phase response plan, I want to take the opportunity to address the recent concerns about data reporting on COVID. Last week, we shared our weekly epidemiologic summary publicly for the first time. It's the same report my team and I use for surveillance and monitoring, and we've made it available and will continue to do so for everyone on our COVID website. I believe Nova Scotians should have access to the same data as public health. As I said, we'll continue to make that available on a weekly basis every Thursday. Going from daily reporting to weekly reporting is a big and necessary shift, especially after 2 years. So to start off, I've asked Shelley Dekes, who's Deputy Chief MOH, to walk all of us through some of the highlights of this week's report and the key takeaways for public health.
Thanks, Dr. Strang. As Dr. Strang mentioned, public health's approach to managing the pandemic has changed, and so have our needs when it comes to surveillance and monitoring. But we are still continuously monitoring the data. During the acute response phase of the pandemic, our surveillance and epi efforts was focused on setting up systems and processes to collect data, basically almost starting from scratch. We had to quickly understand the virus and its impacts in Nova Scotia based on the data that were available to us while we were building those systems and that capacity. And the goal for a lot of that time was to identify and isolate every single case of COVID-19 in the province. That was when we thought we could eliminate this virus. For most of the last 2 years, Nova Scotia and many other jurisdictions have been reporting data to the public every day as a way to help everyone better understand what was happening. During the transition phase of the pandemic, our goals are different. We are no longer trying to identify every case of COVID. We all know that there is a lot of virus out there, and we do not need daily numbers to tell us that. Now we are looking at severe outcomes like hospitalization and death. The weekly report that Dr. Strang mentioned allows us to better see trends over time. We are still interested in seeing the daily numbers, and you can see those too in the weekly report, but monitoring them on a weekly basis helps us see the trajectory of an outbreak without getting caught up in the day-to-day fluctuations that we know are going to happen. Also, our health system partners have the knowledge and the tools necessary to address the day-to-day issues, whether that's dealing with a case in long-term care, managing capacity at the lab, or clinical treatment in hospitals. They know the number of cases admitted to their institutions each day, and they use this information for planning and management. And public health provides support, guidance, and direction when needed. This shift from daily to weekly has happened or is happening everywhere in our province, as well as other provinces and other jurisdictions around the world, not just in Nova Scotia, because it is best practice in public health surveillance and monitoring outside of an acute response scenario. And as Dr. Strang mentioned, we've taken the added step of making a report publicly available. I want to walk you through a few of the highlights in today's report and what the data are telling us. We reported almost 7,000 positive PCR tests this week, which is a notable increase from last week. This is not unexpected. Omicron, including BA2, is a highly transmissible variant and has more opportunity to spread. We're reporting 67 hospitalizations in the past week, and that's a concern. But the number of hospitalizations as a proportion of all of the total positive tests is still quite low, more than 3 times lower than in the first wave. And that is largely due to the impact of vaccine. The figures and data also show that hospitalization and death vary by age. Older people are at much greater risk of severe disease than younger people. Unfortunately, we are reporting 8 deaths this week, which is of course devastating for the families' loved ones. Deaths have been trending down since earlier this year, and overall the case fatality rate, or proportion of people with COVID who die, is substantially lower, both in terms of the population as a whole and in long-term care compared to previous waves, again, because of the impact of vaccine. In terms of what Nova Scotians should take away from this report, there's still a lot of virus out there, which means that we all should take steps to protect ourselves from exposure and infection. We know how to do that. The report also shows that the risk of severe outcomes is much, much lower when you are vaccinated with as many doses as recommended for your age group. The risk of hospitalization with Omicron is 84% lower for people with 3 doses of vaccine compared to people who are either unvaccinated or not fully vaccinated. The risk of dying is even further reduced. It's 92% lower with 3 doses of vaccine compared to populations who are either unvaccinated or not fully vaccinated. This is why we continue to stress that, why vaccine is important and additional doses are important. The other thing the data show us is that age and health status are the biggest risk factors for severe outcomes. And they also happen to be outside of our control, which is where the actions of the rest of us come in. We can use the things that are in our control, like getting vaccinated, wearing masks, staying home while we're sick, as a way to protect those at highest risk.
Surveillance is just one of the things that changes as we move from the acute response phase to the transition phase of pandemic management. This has been an unprecedented situation, and it required, over the last 2 years, an unprecedented response. Restrictions and mandates played a very important role, especially before we had vaccines and while we were still trying to understand a new virus. But public health restrictions were never meant to be in place forever. They can't be in place forever. As I've said before, restrictive measures have societal consequences too. They impact mental health, people's jobs and the economy, and their social connections. And those harms tend to have a disproportionate impact on marginalized and disadvantaged populations. And we cannot ignore these. Not only that, we know that also that restrictive measures become less effective over time. We do need to control COVID, but we also need to consider the very real consequences of the measures we use to control it. It's all about balance. You've heard me use that word many times before. And the balance between the two, controlling COVID and limiting harms, has fundamentally shifted. We are at a point now where we can no longer justify the use of restrictive measures and mandates. My MOH colleagues across the country agree that widespread restrictions are no longer necessary in the management of this pandemic. And I want to be perfectly clear on this point. At this time, public health is not recommending the use of restrictive public health measures.
You had mentioned mental health during the most recent briefing with yourself and Premier Houston as a key reason that restrictions were being lifted on March 21st. And I just want to bring that up because the last time I had a chance to ask a question to you, I'd asked you about what you would say to those who are autoimmune, immunocompromised, immunosuppressed. I'll ask you the same question now, especially since the Let's Get Out There campaign really seems to almost be pushing people to go outside and get involved, even though we know there are large amounts of COVID-19 still around the province. What do you say to the immunocompromised and the immunosuppressed, framing it in that regard?
No, this is a challenging time, and ultimately, people need to be aware of their own specific risk factors for COVID, which are really the key risk factor is age and also underlying health conditions, and then work with people around them to decrease those risks. But that is no different than unfortunately, there are people, always have been people in our communities who are at increased risk for whatever reason, usually age and underlying health conditions from a range of infectious diseases. And to me, the most important point is that all Nova Scotians understand this, and that we all do what we could do, starting with getting vaccinated, masking when we're around other people. There are basic steps that all of us can take to protect those who are at increased risk. So we shouldn't leave those who are at increased risk on their own. And that is public health can't make you do that. To me, it's an obligation to all of us in the caring communities and society that we take on that, especially now in the situation where we are with COVID. Public health will tell you what you can do, support with information, but then ultimately, whether there's a mandate or not, ultimately it comes down to whether people are willing to take that action that shows that they care about others around.
Some of our Telile 24/7 viewers might remember that this past winter and spring, Strait area municipalities, including Richmond County and the town of Port Hawkesbury, have been working hard with local residents and committee members to set up a new accessibility strategy for their individual municipal units. Every municipal council across Nova Scotia has been doing that over the winter and the spring to be able to meet a deadline set by the Province of Nova Scotia to submit these new accessibility plans. Well, the town of Port Hawkesbury is the latest to officially approve an accessibility strategy. The town did that at Council's most recent public meeting this past week. And after the meeting, I spoke to Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton to talk a little bit about what was involved in putting Port Hawkesbury's accessibility strategy together and how it's going to be implemented over the next few years.
Very, very proud of our Port Hawkesbury Accessibility Advisory Committee. We had such phenomenal first voice members on our committee that really made this work so impactful and meaningful. Through their guidance and leadership, we were able to have a plan that, made a lot of sense from our town. And even right down to the design of the strategy that we employed for kind of understanding, how can Port Hawkesbury be a town for everyone? Regardless of level of mobility or ability, how can we be that town for everyone? So in coming up with a strategy, we tried to kind of understand it in digestible bite-sized pieces. So we came up with an 8-tier kind of strategy or approach that started, of course, with community consultations. What are people, how are people interacting in the town? Are there any barriers? What are we doing really well? What do we need to do better? So the community consultation piece was quite important. Then it was information, how are we relaying and receiving information to citizens within the town and people who rely on the town for services? And how can we improve that? How can we remove barriers to the way we communicate and receive information from citizens? And of course, all the ways we move, like getting from point A to point B is so important. And not just, getting behind a wheel and driving in a vehicle. We're talking transit, access to safe, affordable public transportation. We're talking about active transportation. So, do we have the kind of infrastructure, active transportation infrastructure in the town that enables people to get from point A to point B? And also, do we have the kind of active transportation infrastructure that enables a healthy lifestyle for citizens so that they, don't have to get behind a wheel in a vehicle? Maybe they want to go for a walk, or maybe we need to have an accessible active transportation trail that's accessible by, for folks who are in a wheelchair and using, a walker or stroller with their children. So just looking at all the ways we move, and then all the ways we consume, like, being able to access businesses and services here in town. All the ways we live. And in looking at all the ways we live, it was really understanding, all of the activities and events and services that the town provides to the citizens of the town. And we also wanted to make a space in that kind of chapter of our accessibility plan around accessible housing, which is something, super important in terms of removing barriers and all the ways that we live. We want to make sure that, we are a town for everyone, and accessible housing is an important piece of that. All the ways we work was another aspect. All the ways we consume. So it's going to be very important that we work with the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce on, what can we do to acknowledge businesses who are doing important accessibility work and renovations to their businesses, and, how do we acknowledge and celebrate them, and encourage other businesses to do the same. So when you look at even all the ways we live in accessible housing, that's going to require strong collaboration, strong partnerships with the organizations and levels of government that have accessible housing as part of their mandates. That's not something that the town can do alone. So again, there are some things like town-owned municipal facilities, town-owned green spaces that we potentially can move the needle on, short, medium, and long-term goals for accessibility. And then there are partnerships that will have to be stricken in terms of moving the needle on other items that are outside the purview of our municipal, control. Our accessibility plan is going to take us through from 2022 to 2025. And as per recommendation that we've made as an accessibility committee, we want to treat that document as a living document so that, we are always ready, willing, and able to take feedback from citizens with regard to our outdoor built environments, our indoor built environments, all of the other categories that I have referred to. And at the end of the day, yes, there are certain things that our council can take on in terms of moving the needle on accessibility, but there is a wide breadth of work as well.
Now, one way to make a town, a county, or any other municipal unit more accessible is to make it welcoming for the youngest residents of that municipal unit. That includes infants, toddlers, children in general, but also the parents of these young children, making them more welcome and helping them find their way during these early childhood years. Jim Mustard is a former municipal councillor from Inverness County, and for the past 5 years, he and his colleagues with the Raising the Villages initiative have been working hard to make sure that supports are made necessary for new mothers of any age. He recently updated the activities of Raising the Villages at the latest regular monthly meeting of Port Hawkesbury Town Council. So here's a look at Jim Mustard's presentation, as well as some commentary following the presentation by the Mayor of Port Hawkesbury, Brenda Chisholm-Beaton. Take a listen.
We're losing ground in our communities. The most important thing is our sense of belonging, connectivity, and well-being, which, if we look at any of the statistics around mental health, we're seeing an increase. And so I'm just going to do this gently. I know that Port Hawkesbury and the welcoming, the work around the welcoming communities piece, Councillor Coyne, is going along well. and we're picking up momentum. And timing's everything. They said at Victoria County, I did a presentation, even after 6 years, what makes you think this is going somewhere? I said, in 6 years, we've created a place for people to actually bring this story to life. So we'll share a bit of that, what's going on in Bedeque and Bay St. Lawrence and here in Port Hawkesbury. So here we go. So, Raising the Villages Mawiomi Mijiwajik, which translates to Gathering to Our Children. For our children in the early years, starting strong, creating welcoming spaces to connect and belong. So I'm just going to touch base on where this came from. So to recognize we're located in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded territory, the Mi'kmaq people, and through Raising the Villages Mawiomi Mijiwajik, we are weaving back together our lives, from our infants to our elders, and from across all cultures to deepen and respect the understanding for each other. So it's kind of diversity and unity, not conformity. So this is where it came from. And it's good to remind ourselves that the Ivany Commission was struck to look at the economy. So what are we going to do here? And so, you got John Bragg on there, you got Susanna Fuller, and some really movers and shakers that put together that commission, and they said, look, we've got some attitude problems, we got some structural problems. Then they created the One Nova Scotia Coalition, which was 15 leaders. And they examined everything. So 3 leaders of the provincial parties, business leaders, First Nations, 1 person from health, and they looked at all the statistics and said, well, the number 1 investment we can make is the early years. So power to the province, because they created the pre-primary program. Power to the federal government, where they're putting $10 daycare in. But there's still a gap. There's still a gap. And what they asked us to do, out of that commission, here's the playbook, communities. They said, can you guys go out there and see what's going on with families, with young children, and get them to develop what the notion of welcome is. So going along with what's going on with the Welcoming Communities Initiative in Port Hawkesbury, what does welcome mean to you if you're a newcomer to the community? What does welcome mean to you when you're a mother for the first time and you lose your whole community? All the people you went out, everything changes in a moment. What's your welcoming look like now? How do you belong in the community? So I think we did this in 2017, and we're looking at creating some pilots out of this. So when we look at 2016, I was still elected, just got elected. We held a meeting here in the Shannon studio, and we really talked about what is going on right now with young families and what more is needed. That 2017 research in 2018 really led to us looking at trying to develop something that we thought was really important for us, which was some models of these centers. So we created in 2020, I didn't get reelected, and at that time it was still being an initiative from the municipality of Inverness with partnerships like Port Hawkesbury and Victoria County, and Cook and Wigama. So we said, well, I can't really expect the municipality, because everyone's a champion of something on council here. And so I stepped back and we talked over the Zoom with numbers of people, including MLAs, like Barb Adams, and we said, well, let's create a cooperative. And it's a multi-sector co-op, which means it's looking at health. It's how do we improve the health of communities. So that's where the co-op came from. So we created this co-op, and who's involved is representatives from Richmond County, right through Inverness, Victoria, First Nations, and we've got a bunch of partnerships. We just did a presentation in Victoria County, and Keith Bain, the MLA, said, we want you to talk to Minister Comer around mental health and addiction. So there's lights coming on. There's lights coming on. And the Raising the Villages there, as you can see that, this is in your files. I'm not going to go over it, but it's about their awareness of why the early years are number 1, and to get some policy in place so we can sustain the momentum when we get these models up and going. So it's to help shape what communities need, and then help be the backbone to make sure that there's attention to this at the provincial level and federal level, so that municipalities can be the net beneficiaries, but we don't have to pay for it all. And what we know in Inverness County, how our children are doing, they're struggling. And this is before the pandemic, everyone. And this is not a blame of parents. Please, please remind ourselves that parents always had others. They always had grandmothers and aunties. Before 40 years ago, every home had an extended family. All of you grew up in it. And that's not the case anymore. So when you're first pregnant and you have your first baby, it's a lonely place. And so where do we find the people we want to meet with, the services we need, and it feels like we're welcome? So poverty rates still going through the roof. 30% of our children. So what do we envision? Here's the model. We want to go for something patchwork and silos, where it's not to blame governments. This is how you try to react to things that are going on in our community. You created more services, but you didn't co-locate them. You created more programs, but you didn't coordinate them. So what we're doing is saying, let's shape it from the municipal raising the villages level and have all those villages in Port Hawkesbury. Maybe you have 2 centers in Port Hawkesbury. Maybe you have one over by Tamarack as well as one over here. And what does it look like when you're in Mabu? And what does it look like when you're in Waikagama? Or what does it look like in St. Peter's? So we can help create those models with the communities, because this is something that takes a little bit of time to envision what this looks like. Because it starts prenatally and goes right through, so it's seamless. You can look at all the things you'd have there: midwives, doulas, peer-to-peer, parents meeting parents, nutritional support, a shared loving lap, like where's grandma? And even if it's not your grandma, where's the loving lap that can help extend the love that we all deserve as an infant? Pediatricians, intergenerational, speech and language, early intervention, they're all here. You know, the mayor's sister, bless her soul, has been early intervention and promoting this model, but she can only do so much from early intervention. She says if we had centers like that, we could do so much more with our staff. So this is just saying a continuum that really creates a one-stop shop, the same as we would imagine our communities to be when you go into the Sobeys. All your groceries are there. You go into the school, all the classrooms are there. If we look at what's needed from prenatal right through, it would be like, that's our village again. And so this idea that we can actually work upstream, which means we're working before things become real issues, to create welcoming community spaces, reduce childhood poverty at the source. It's hard sometimes to reduce poverty downstream, but if we make that place the enriched environment that really supports the youngest citizens with food, with the actual love and whatever other needs they have, then that starts to create equity. Reduce mental health, crime, low literacy, addictions, unemployability. Connect to transit local food, like you've got a center, now you can connect to it and people can have access to it. Strengthen the culture and language for newcomers as well as the Gaelic, Acadian, and First Nations languages. That's where you make the difference. Provide universal access and support to services programs. Like I said, you come in there, someone's coordinated. When the early intervention's coming in, we can all access that service because it's the 3rd Tuesday of the month. The office is there, everyone feels welcome, you can hang out, meanwhile you're having a great time. Think about that. And then your business readiness, what you're doing in Port Hawkesbury, to make this place business friendly is attracting young families and keeping them here. That's our game changer. That's why the Immunocompromised Commission coming to the One Nova Scotia, they said, we can't do it, but you guys are the ones that welcome people. You communities are the place where the rubber hits the road. Not a program from out in Halifax dropping in. We know the pre-primary are good. They're in the school. We know the child care is going to be good. We're going to expand that. But this is really the kind of informal coordinator to make this happen. So why has the early years been the number one? This 20 years we've known this. It sets trajectories for life. So look at these, all these milestones: vision, hearing, the idea of habitual ways of responding, emotional control, language, symbols, being able to recognize symbols, peer social skills, and numbers, so numeracy. Almost all of them peak before childcare, which is at 18 months. So there's a lot of peaking in the development of the brain well before you become part of a group system that's supported. So that gap is a place for us to create the benefits of what our community can do. And so this is an example. I got my daughter who came with us at 5 years old, Jeanette, bless her soul, taught me this one. She said, you know, a parent or somebody sees a snake, they get scared, their heartbeat goes up, and they jump away. She said when a baby gets tired, scared, change the diaper, needs to be held, it's hot or they're cold, they're hungry, or they're lonely, they cry, but they can't get away from it until someone comes and helps them. The difference is when you get scared at your age, you just move away from the fear. When a baby needs it, they cry, and someone needs to be there. That's where the extended family, the village, always was there. So when a mother's tired, when a mother's alone at home, it's a harder piece to make this happen. And when this doesn't get met early on, these are the things that show up long term. These are the things that show up downstream. Adverse mental health, depression, malnutrition, cardiovascular disease, memory loss, immune deficiency, drug and alcohol addiction, ADHD, and asthma and allergies are all been shown to appear later on in life. So I'm not going to go into these studies, but they're all there. They're 20 years old. They're 20 years old, those studies. That 10 times more vulnerable if you have an adverse, neglected early childhood than if you have a supported one for mental health and addictions. So we need to know the evidence is there. Grandma knew best. You pick up a crying baby, and she was there to do it. So what are we doing on top of this? And then the economic story. So here's the numbers game. This is a Nobel economist. And he said, if you put $1 in before they start school, you'll get as high as $8 return. If you put it in after they go to school, you're going to get less than $1 return. So he did all the studies of everything. He was from Chicago. And he said, this is where you don't wait to invest later when upstream has been proven. And then this is the numbers I got from the Canadian Addictions Mental Health Centre out of Ontario. So they did a study across Canada. The most recent, $51 billion a year is lost in healthcare costs and lost productivity and reductions in health-related quality of life from mental health. In Nova Scotia, that would translate to $1.4 billion a year spent in treatment and substance use disorders, suicide prevention, the economic costs of healthcare, and lost productivity. That translates for this community in Port Hawkesbury to $4.1 million. That's how much it's costing us. So on the other one, we said $8 in for every $1 out. What if we created 2 centers in this community, and you only need a coordinator and a half for each center, and some overhead? Pay some heat and lights to the Civic Center if it was in the craft room, or wherever it is. That's a $300,000 a year investment, and you get $8 back on every dollar in if you're doing it, right? So multiply your 8 times 300, and you got $2.4 million you're making every year, and it's not costing you $4.1 million. So the inverse is it's a $6 million differential if we do this. And across the whole province, this is why I know what it's like to sit on council. But like, okay, so what's this look like for the whole province? It's going to cost a lot of money. $45 to $60 million for the whole province to enact this, because the professionals are all out there. We need people who know how to make a welcoming center welcoming and to coordinate. So it's not a PhD level. It's not that you aren't PhD level. You're PhD level in community development, but it's not accreditation to be the best at early child development and all these other things. You're really creating the welcoming center. So these numbers don't scare me. Anybody who just saw the provincial budget, some pretty big numbers there in health, right? A lot. This is health. So this is why I think Minister Comer's trying to take a look at this. And so then there's our regional imperative. Let's create some hubs all over. So we have Port Hawkesbury creating a welcoming community. Bay St. Lawrence, Bold and Bedeque are moving forward on this. We're looking to get some funding this year to support that coordination for both those centers. Bay St. Lawrence has created a room that they're dedicating to raising the villages. Bold is now looking to extend those programs so that they can be a one-stop shop. In the daytime, it's young families. Elders are in there. After-school programs are in there, because the families have gone back there at doing. On the weekends, it's adolescent program. Imagine. Not just focused on youth, but seamless. And so, and this last piece is that this last summer we presented at the Summer Institute in PEI. It was all done virtually. Anyways, they applied for ESDC funding and got funding to actually address this upstream policy we're talking about. And the examples they're using are raising the villages. And so they're meeting with the premiers in the next 4 months, plus we're hosting, the same as we had in the Shannon studio in 2017, a regional meeting to talk about this. So it's not on your backs. The beauty of this is we're doing this together with people like Councillor Coyne, with people like our community people like Louise Egan. We're doing with those people to try to get the attention of the province that this is the best investment we can make. Well, one of them. So this will be next year. Expand the network. Create an infographic that's going to be developed. I'm just talking to St. FX and CBU. They can be helpful on this. Support the pilot sites. So we have one here. Let's support that one, as well as we have one starting, and we're looking at Bold and Bay St. Lawrence. Hosting the spring workshop. We have some local gatherings planned with some suburb students coming on, and we're going to apply for multi-year funding from MacDonald Foundation, because we figure we're in the right place now. We have the partnerships. We just need to get beyond what we've done is really get by with the support of municipalities and the United Way and community health boards, but it's really next level now.
The event that we had been discussing was a families expo, and that project was done in collaboration with a number of different groups, including Raising the Villages. The town of Port Hawkesbury also supported that event by contributing the Bearhead Room free of charge. We also worked with public health. We worked with, I believe, early childhood intervention. Olivia Melnick was one of our designers and planners on that project. And the whole idea, the concept behind that is that oftentimes families are either A, unaware of the supports that exist in a community that could potentially help really more than just families, like different cohorts within the family unit, as well as persons of all ages, like from birth to 99 plus. So what we really wanted to do was start kind of breaking down those silos and bringing as many service providers as we could into one room and inviting the community in, like families, seniors, anybody really who wanted to come in and move from table to table. And each of those 55 tables had a different service provider, whether it was the Evergreen Club was there participating, talking about, what are some of the things that they do in the community and how can you participate or how can you support or how can you be part of that club. We had, folks from the CERIC, I believe it was the CERIC Share and Care were there. So, we had like public health, but we also had 411, we had provincial participants there. So at the end of the day, what it really did was it broke down all of those silos and it provided like a one-stop shopping for families. So as they were going through the Bearhead Room, they were able to pick up pamphlets or ask questions and really be able to understand all that's available to support everyone in the Strait area, not just the town of Port Hawkesbury, in the Strait area. And oftentimes, most of the 500 people that ended up flowing through the room that day learned something or were connected in some way. So that was the benefit of that event was, we were connecting people to services. And oftentimes most of those services were free of charge. So a lot of families did receive support as a result of that event. So I can't imagine how that one particular event how could that translate into a brick and mortar welcoming center as Jim kind of envisioned and suggested to council.
Those events point direction. Are we there yet? No, but early childhood wasn't even recognized by the province until 2014 as a placeholder within the government. There was only childcare under community services. So everything's evolving. It's all, and I think we hold a story here in Cape Breton of just how it felt 40 years ago. And we didn't understand how valuable it was. So we can't go back there, but we can go forward with the best of. You have your seniors Christmas thing. You have 300 seniors, you're serving them. You have young people helping them. You have all these examples of exactly what we're talking about. So maybe we can make this the next step that really revitalizes the core of our community.
So as we move forward, as we begin to continue to flesh out what that could look like for the town of Port Hawkesbury, clearly we are a service center here in the town. Our population is small, but our service capacity is mighty. So we definitely service anywhere between 20 to 25,000 people a day, despite the fact that our population numbers are closer to about 3,500. And this would be most definitely an ideal place to have a place where everyone can feel welcome and belong and can find out, how can they be supported within our community and in our region. So council certainly is supportive, but at the end of the day, we still have to continue to learn more, understand what other funding partners could be coming to the table, and understand what those next steps are. But there could be some future small-scale events that can kind of give us a little bit of direction in terms of what does our community need currently as a result of the global pandemic. What does support look like now? It might have looked a little bit differently back in 2017, but what does it look like now in 2022? So hopefully that event and other welcoming events will continue to help us move the needle on how we can be more supportive and how we can participate as a Raising the Villages entity here in the town of Port Hawkesbury.
Here in the Strait area, we have recently said goodbye to a former chair of both the Strait Regional School Board and the former Inverness District School Board. Her name is Mary Jess MacDonald, and she passed away just last week. Following the latest regular monthly meeting of Port Hawkesbury Town Council, I asked Brenda Chisholm-Beaton, the Mayor of Port Hawkesbury, to reflect on the role that Mary Jess MacDonald has played over the years, not just in representing the district of South Inverness, which takes in the town of Port Hawkesbury, but in chairing the entire Strait Regional School Board before it was shut down in 2018 to become the Strait Regional Centre for Education. Here's Mayor Chisholm-Beaton reflecting on the life and legacy of Mary Jess MacDonald right now.
For everyone who knew Mary Jess, she was an extraordinary person, certainly not afraid to take on roles in the community and show leadership, not just in Inverness, but also to represent the entire Strait area. So she definitely was a trailblazer and certainly a role model for many. So we definitely want to extend our condolences to the MacDonald family and certainly express our sympathies during this time of sorrow. Her style of leadership was definitely all about bringing the voice of people to whatever table that she was sitting at. And she always made herself accessible and available to citizens who had, positive feedback or even any issues anyway, my sense is that she continued to be elected to positions because of her leadership style, and she was very much a leader for the people.
Sadly, Mary Jess MacDonald wasn't the only Inverness County leader to pass away in recent weeks. The sitting warden of Inverness County, Laurie Cranton, left our world in early March. Later in the month, Richmond warden Amanda Mumberket paid tribute to Cranton at the regular meeting of Municipal Council.
Laurie Cranton, the warden for Inverness County, who also represented constituents in District 2, the Grand Etang, St. Joseph de Moines, and Margaree areas. Warden Cranton was a native of Margaree, and I always knew him through the years to be a tireless advocate for people with disabilities, whether physical or mental. He himself became a paraplegic harvesting pulpwood. A co-worker felled a large tree, and with the noise from the heavy logging equipment, Laurie couldn't hear the warnings that it was falling in his direction, and he resulted in a permanent injury to him, and he was in a wheelchair for many years. He was definitely a force, though, in his advocacy for improved accessibility, roads and bridges, and recreational trails in the county. He was a founding member of the Margaree Highlanders Snowmobile Club. He did research with the provincial government on off-highway vehicle strategies as chair of a ministerial advisory committee for off-highway vehicles. He also served as president of the Cape Breton Island Pathways Association, which aimed to develop a network of multi-use trails through the island. Warden Cranton set an example for all of us with his work at council, and though I know Inverness County will be feeling his loss for years to come, he leaves a legacy of determination, I think, kindness and support, and of course, advocacy. So I just wanted to take a moment to extend our condolences to council and staff at Inverness County and also to Warden Cranton's family on their loss. I've known Warden Cranton for a lot of years in my previous lives, with the Chamber of Commerce and so forth. And he's just always impressed me with his steadfast advocacy for his community, but also specifically on accessibility. And I really point to him and to the late Callum McQuarrie in Inverness as well as sort of people who inspired me to take a more active approach on the accessibility file, and I can't even tell you how rewarding that has been. So it really is the loss of someone who provided some inspirational leadership on that front. So my sympathies are with not just the staff and council, but also with his family and the whole community for sure.
Does his example guide you as the warden of a neighboring county?
Well, I try, but I don't know that I'll ever be as wise and thoughtful in my delivery as Warden Cranton. He was just he's a real gem of a person, but certainly is something to be aspiring to.
And as always, we try to end Telile 24/7 on a lighter note, so we're going to play our world-famous Fast Five game. This week's volunteer is Natalie Stevens. She's the support coordinator for the Strait Area chapter of Autism Nova Scotia, and she foolishly agreed to answer my silly questions for the end of the show. Here's Natalie Stevens playing the Fast Five game right now. And the latest person to be suckered into playing Telile 24/7's Fast 5 game is Natalie Stevens, the support coordinator for Autism Nova Scotia's Strait Area Regional Council. Natalie, are you ready to play the Fast 5?
Sure.
That's the stuff.
Okay. Me into this.
All right. Don't you worry. It's like a final exam all about yourself, so there's no way you can lose. Here we go.
All right.
Question number 1, coffee, tea, or neither?
Neither.
Okay, you go with water, do you?
Juice. Pop. Yeah.
Okay, there we go, right on. Question number 2, you can binge watch any TV show you want for a whole week. What is that TV show?
Oh, Grey's Anatomy, Walking Dead, I don't know, Station 19, those types.
It's hospitals or zombies for Natalie Stevens.
Yeah, definitely.
There we are. All right, question number 3, dream vacation.
I'd love to go to Hawaii, but I'm going to say the pyramids in Egypt is definitely my dream vacation.
You were the first person playing this game to say either of those two places. That's very cool. Well done. All right. Question number 4, your happy place.
I don't like the beach, but I love the water. So, like, I like sitting on the ocean, like rocks, and hearing it crash in. So, like, Peggy's Cove type of place. So, let's go with that. Peggy's Cove.
Peggy's Cove. There we are. There are lots of places that qualify for hearing the waves crash in, especially here in the Strait area. But yeah, Peggy's Cove is a good one for sure. Yeah. And question number 5, you can be any animal for one day. What is that animal?
Pig.
Did you say pig?
I did.
Why a pig?
They're my favorite animal. That's just what popped into my head.
I love that.
No reason. I just want to roll around the mud, I guess.
Natalie just wants to roll in the mud. Can I say you're the first person playing this game to ever say pig, and I almost feel like it's long overdue. Pigs have a pretty good life, don't they?
Just lay in the mud, lay in the sun. Like, how else can you eat what you want? Like,
exactly. There we go. I'll go with that. I'll go with that. Right. Natalie, this has been great. Thank you for playing the Fast 5 with me.
Thanks, Adam.
Natalie Stevens is the support coordinator for the Strait Area Regional Council of Autism Nova Scotia, and she is the latest volunteer to play the Fast 5 on Telile 24/7. And that wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thank you for tuning in, and a special thank you to my guests this week, Brenda Chisholm-Beaton and Natalie Stevens. If you have any comments or thoughts about what you've seen over the past hour, or you'd just like to offer suggestions for future episodes of the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can contact me directly. My phone number is 902-625-8863, or you can reach me by email. The address is adamjrcook, cook with an E, @gmail.com. Don't forget you can contact Telile Community Television directly with your suggestions or your thoughts. You can reach Telile at the station in Arishat by calling 902-226-1928, or you can use the email address telile@telile.tv. Don't forget to follow Telile on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And our Telile YouTube channel features every single edition of Telile 24/7, including this one, as well as our sister programs Roundtable and Notre Côté. For now, I'm Adam Cooke. Thank you for tuning in once again to this week's edition of Telile 24/7. I look forward to seeing you again next time with a brand new show. Bye for now.